Welcome to the Unexpected Podcast. This is your host, Justin Mahwikizi, and today we're joined by a great guest, Stuart Meyer, who is the producer of a documentary I watched called New York Pizza Dreams. And we wanted to talk more about his background, his story, and how he sees leadership and storytelling coming into today's world. Stuart, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I love learning a little bit more about your story, and I love the name of your podcast. I think every great story begins with something unexpected, so I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I agree. We miss you here in Illinois, but I'm pretty sure Florida is treating you and your wife well.
We love it down here. We love it down here, but what we do miss, we miss Naperville. We were there for 21 years, and it's still a piece of our heart, piece of our home.
Absolutely. Hey, your story is interesting in this way, Stuart. When you were 8 years old, you used to record your family on cassette recorder. Some of these kids don't know what a cassette recorder means anymore, but did you already know then? Did you have a feeling that those moments mattered? What made you at 8 years old to seek to do that?
It just honestly really came naturally. We got a little family tape recorder. It wasn't anything fancy. But to me, I gravitated towards it, was recording everything I possibly could. And I think, I'm a big believer, that the coincidence of our lives are not that coincidental. I feel like we're all on a journey, and I just broke the first rule of podcasting is to turn your phone off. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
But that we're all on a journey that continues to unfold and present itself as we move through this lifetime. And for me, I just really was captivated by those moments. I wanted those moments to live on, and in a way, I think I just kind of wanted to study and examine those moments, when you capture it. And, I've always had this sense of, I wouldn't say it's like stuck in the past or nostalgia, but trying to put all the pieces together to kind of make sense of every step of our human journey.
That's great. Were your parents or your family storytellers, or did you become the storyteller for your family?
They were. My father was a journalist. He published a shopper newspaper for 30 plus years, but he still wrote the front page business briefs every month, which really kind of became a history of local businesses and the people and families behind them. And I used to tag along with him at a particular point in the month. He published once a month. So, usually the Saturday where he's dropping off the invoices for the advertising, he'd bring one of the kids along. I think that was probably by design to to show them the mouths where the food needed to be inserted. But it was just really a great dive into small town life, small town business, independent business, local business, family business. And really getting to know who they are, their stories, their personalities. Everyone has an interesting story to tell, and just really, kind of gleaned from that. I think my dad always had visions of being a much more traditional journalist, but he was also an entrepreneur by heart, and I think he saw an opportunity to publish his little shopper newspaper, and he did it for a long time.
It's amazing. In fact, you remind me of I believe it's a West African song that goes something like "Nobody is a nobody, so tell somebody," and it aligns with what you just said in the sense that everybody has a story that needs to be told, and people should know that, especially if they're fighting anxiety and depression or otherwise.
Absolutely. And I like to race towards the people who no one's telling their story.
That's right. It's usually the most interesting arc of a story, and can be gripping and insightful once you get them to tell their story. So I also like that your father used to take you or the other kids when he was dropping invoices, because it's a way of you're inheriting how he thinks and how he maneuvers, and instinctively your mind gets programmed for that. So that's excellent that your father was able to do that.
Absolutely.
Now, you also described that you used to secretly record your family even when they told you not to do it. What were you searching for? Why do you think it drove you to do that?
I think that at a very young age, I was just trying to understand it all. To me, it's like I always gravitated towards truth, the family truths. As a Catholic child, we strive toward honesty, and just the real moments, as they happen, and a lot of ways I can't explain it. I just was just naturally drawn to it. I think it's part of my life's intention in being here, as I've continued to move along and trying to tell stories at every turn, at every opportunity that I possibly can. But kind of a funny aside story was I eventually graduated to in the 1980s to my boombox, and I delivered my dad's newspaper, saved up my money, and not one but two speakers, a stereo boombox. I mean, that was the
Right.
time.
Yeah, because you could attach them and yeah, remove them,
Yeah.
etc. Yeah.
The interesting thing about this boombox was it had a shortwave radio. And aside from listening to the BBC as a child in a small town of Kentucky, and whatever else that I could get from Europe, and even some Russian radio that I picked up on, remembering, this is the Cold War era, or towards the end of the Cold War era. So, but I also found that it could also pick up the wave of my sister's cordless telephone. So
Please do tell. Yeah.
I would also record her for not for an extended period of time, but when I figured it out, I recorded a couple of her phone calls, and then had a good time showing her that I was able to do that. And I got in a great big amount of trouble, but it was actually pretty fun.
And you survived. That's the good news.
I survived. Well, I do have some scars I can show you, but I was the baby, so I just got brutalized all the time. So
That's all good. I know. I fully understand that. Now, you just said you grew up in small town Kentucky. What did adulthood look like to you, or at least to your imagination then?
the interesting thing is I never wanted to be an adult. As a matter of fact, I still don't want to be an adult. I live about an hour and a half to 2 hours away from Walt Disney World. Sometimes I'll go once a month. When we were young, I think when we're young, we fully understand what we want our life to feel like, and unapologetically, we just go after it.
Yes.
Until the time comes as we grow older, we become overly obsessed with what our life should look like, which sends us in so many wrong directions. And I've spent the last 2 decades kind of backing my way out of the wrong directions and refocusing on a life that feels right. I'm actually writing a memoir right now that I spent a good chunk of last year writing. My wife had a major surgery last year, and it ended up getting kind of parked. But I think for a good reason, because I needed to let it rest to come back to it. But really, it's about the raw human journey. And kind of looking for signals of what are the human truths that can guide us forward, that we can use to navigate, or at least I use to navigate through my life. But it's kind of a funny series of tragic and happy and funny and difficult stories, of just all the misdirections that I pursued in my life, and heartbreak early on, losing my parents very early in life, at least very early in my adult life, let's say. And just coming to grips with that, trying to understand it all, how it shaped me, and what light am I here to shine upon this world? And that's what I try to do a little bit each and every day. 17 years ago, I basically invented my dream job, which I call social frequency media communications, just because I wanted to be creative every day and do storytelling and just to see where the road led, and to be able to form be able to amass wealth that is far greater than money, and that's freedom. And that's the freedom to have a voice, the freedom to share your voice, the freedom to capture the voices of others, the freedom to do what it is that you felt like you were put on this earth to do. And I've never looked back. So yeah, I go back to I didn't want to be an adult, and I'm trying to work my way out of being such an adult, because I'm former CEO of a national organization. I went to law school. I worked in politics for a while. I did all of these different things. I was I was an athlete growing up, but also in choir. And, it's like these two versions of ourselves that we carry with us through our life. What we instinctively feel like we should be doing versus that which what we want our life to look like.
Yeah.
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 And unfortunately, that dominates a lot of our life. I think a lot of most people's lives. I think people will relate to those stories. So just really enjoying the journey of that. Just the process of writing a memoir. Even if it never sees the light of day or gets published, I just think that it's a journey that everyone should go on, even if it's journaling.
I agree. I agree. When you're ready to publish that memoir, I'll be your first buyer for sure. Because
All right.
I,
All right.
you mentioned signals. That was that. From my own life, I agree with those type of signals. I think a child until 7, they're one with whatever signal their life is supposed to be. But as you grow up and you're more conscious of the different issues around you or the different architectures around you, you tend to be pulled one way or another, and it can take a long time, a lot of misdirections, like you said, to really find that signal that was integral to you as a child.
Yeah.
Now, was there one conversation from childhood that you still remember, almost word for word?
Yeah. To me, I was thinking about this is not really a conversation, but a teacher's actions, which gave me something that I think is the most important thing any of us can get in our human lives, and that's permission. I think we spend a lot of our lives waiting for permission to do something.
Yes.
For someone to say, "Yeah, go for it. You should do that." Okay, I will. But it was my fourth grade teacher, Miss Paula Sarver, and I guess I went to Catholic school, so I was always plotting and planning. I was always being difficult and asking all the tough questions. And but she excused me and two others from my classroom to create a class newspaper. And we came up with this whole idea. I mean, granted, my dad was kind of published a shopper newspaper, so it's kind of hanging around in his windowless office and learning how to lay out ads and use the border tape the old-fashioned way before computers really came along.
Yeah.
But it was so astonishing to me that we were excused from classwork to take on this larger mission of creating a class newspaper. And I think we only created a couple of issues, but I remember there was a walk-in supplies closet in our classroom, and that was kind of our newspaper office. We got to go in there. You could hear class going on. I'm like, and then it's like, it was just amazing that, aside from what we were supposed to do, we were given an opportunity to explore what we wanted to do.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but I think that was, kind of the birth of some of my entrepreneurial energies, to write your own story, and to not be afraid to sort of go against the grain of what's considered to be the norm.
That's right. How did you pull that off to convince Miss Paula Sarver to give you that mission, that rules and structure, that path? Was it a program within the class, or?
No, it wasn't at all. I think basically I just approached her and shared the vision for it. It wasn't just, hey, can we get out of class to create a class newspaper? I talked about, I wanted to put a word search in there, and we wanted to report on different students in the class and to talk about the playground and how the kickball's going this time of year. And I think once she saw that I actually had this tiny little pint-sized vision and wasn't just trying to get out of class, she really, I think, went out of her way, and probably wasn't supposed to, but to support us in doing that. And it made such a huge difference in my life. I guess, when I decided to walk away from, very comfortable executive management role to do my own thing without a single client. I think I look back to what Miss Sarver, let me do, and sort of guiding our little class newspaper, and it all worked out. And so I think that was such a beautiful gift to get.
Amazing. That's amazing. And Ms. Sarver was essentially a catalyst in early in your life. And I wish more teachers were like, and I'm sure some teachers still do similar things where they're encouraging once they see a spark in a child's vision. And so That is an amazing story. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mrs. Sarver. I know she's still out there somewhere. I got to track her because she was a young teacher. I think
Oh,
that
okay.
was the difference. We had a lot of veteran teachers. Fortunately, my brother and sister had the nuns. The nuns
Yes.
had moved on by the time I entered St. James Catholic Elementary School. But a lot of the teachers were sort of more later career stage. But I think Mrs. Sarver, it may have been her first year as a teacher, and I thought that that fresh approach, hopefully she continued to carry it with her in her teaching career.
Well, if you find her, I'm sure you guys were not the only kids she did that for.
No, I'm sure it
There
wasn't.
could be a bunch of enterprising, midlife gentlemen and gentle ladies who trace back to Miss Sarver's actions. So that's a great story. Now, you entered law school, but walked away after losing your mother. How did, and my condolences, of course, but how did grief change your understanding of what success meant to you in life?
It changed everything. At that point, I was kind of carrying this whole notion of what my life should look like versus what I wanted my life to feel like. And they'd always been traveling on separate tracks. And I think her death, she had a year-long battle with brain cancer, and we had been home around her for almost 3 months that summer before it was finally time. I had to go. I'd worked long and hard to get into law school. I'd left my job in politics, and I had to leave. And we had one last conversation, and it was her dying words before I left. And she shared but one regret that she had in life, and really it was the cumulative price of her selflessness.
Mm.
And I think we live in a world that celebrates selflessness and admonishes selfishness. And these are two themes that I'm working with in my memoir. Is that I would argue, I think that in life we may be too selfless and not selfish enough sometimes. And I think the word selfish has gotten such a negative connotation to it. But if I had a really great professor, an honors professor in college that ran this leadership studies program that I was in, and in our idle time, he loved language, and he loved to take any word and break it down by its roots and stems, and taught us how, even without a dictionary, if you break a word down into its individual components, you can sort of figure out what that word means. And if you take the word selfish, it's self, and ish is sort of, kind of, sort of,
Mhm.
and I think if we kind of sort of, focus on ourself and what it is that we're trying to get, no one knows what's going on inside our minds.
Correct.
Sometimes we need to be a little selfish and less selfless in sort of living the life that we were meant to live and intended to live. And she, loved her life, but realized that, there's so much that she just never did because she did not have the strength to be to be a little more selfish and a little less selfless. I mean, she was the most selfless woman I've ever known. And it's a big theme in my memoir. It's a big turning point in the memoir. And like I say, I think those tracks, those separate tracks I was on really converged. And I left her the weekend before my week-long orientation before law school started. She passed away the next weekend. And instead of starting my first week of law school classes, I was on the road to come home for the funeral. And I came back and finished the entire first year and did really well. There was an all-out intervention to try to keep me from leaving law school. But it's like those words just kept ringing in my head and in my ears. And after her death, I think the death of a parent, it really does something to us. So something, the strings that I was clinging to that kept me motivated to be in law school, it's like they snapped. And suddenly I'm like, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And so I didn't have a lot of a safety net after that, but dropped out and sort of moved on and tried to find the next best direction that was kind of leading me a little bit back to myself and to do the things that I'd always wanted to do beneath the surface. I mean, I was already composing music and songwriting, and I wasn't in filmmaking yet. I didn't have the opportunity to be, but moved to Chicago and ultimately ran into some filmmakers and got involved with them, and that's how I initially got into film, was composing film music, which is what I always wanted to do. I was never saw myself as much of a filmmaker,
Yeah.
but the reason I love to compose music is because of the unspoken story that music tells, and especially
Doesn't it? It does. You're right.
especially film music. And so that was wonderful. But I really became, it sort of amplified my passion for storytelling, and in particular documentary film, because the filmmakers I was involved with, there was one science fiction filmmaker. There was another guy making a rom-com, which was the first film I did, called The Promise of You. There was mockumentaries. There was one mockumentary I did the music for, and came really close to moving out to California. Everyone else did, and I was the only one that stayed behind. And I chose love over that,
Yeah.
and convinced that I could make films and be involved in filmmaking where I was. The more time I spent out there, I realized the disparity between the countless masses that continue to arrive in LA every single day in hopes of something, and how far away they are, and how close they probably will never get, in a place that doesn't necessarily support what they want to do, versus being in a place where filmmaking and music and composing is more novel, and I think more widely accepted. um, and it really opened up the door to me to enter into filmmaking, because it was just an extension of the tape recorder that I used to record all my families. I started having kids, and finally got my first video camera and started making little documentaries of my kids that became this annual Thanksgiving tradition. And there was just something special about it. I mean, it was funny, it was it was heartwarming. I would throw some of my music into it. And then it just sort of took off beyond that I just wanted to make the leap, and make my first documentary film, which started back in, I think, 2008. It ended up taking 10 years
Ha! Wow.
to do that one.
Was it self-funded or?
Of course.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Independent film means no money.
Basically. Well, now looking back, do you think? Well, what do you think your mother would? Do you think she'll be surprised with the way your life story and the road you took ended up, or would she be basically, that's my Stuart? What do you think your mother would say?
I think once she knew that I landed solidly on my own 2 feet, she would be proud and happy. I think she probably would have been very nervous of the risks and chances that I've taken,
Yeah.
leaps of faith that I have. But I think at the end of the day, she will have recognized that, you know, I was kind of in a way carrying on her unfinished business as well. And part of it's, leaving Kentucky. A lot of people don't leave, and that in itself is a huge feat, and it opened up my life to the rest of the world. And I still love Kentucky. It'll always be home. My son is actually graduating from the University of Kentucky, third generation Wildcat. In December. That was entirely unexpected that he ended up there from Naperville in Illinois.
Right.
But I think it's a wondrously beautiful thing. I think she's smiling down and proud of all of the reasons that I've done what I've done in life.
It's amazing. Now, you also taught yourself piano while your brother was receiving lessons. And that opened the question for me. Do you think creativity often comes from limitations?
I think creativity can definitely come from limitations. I think the best creativity does come from limitations. Throughout my life, I found the less equipment, the less bells and whistles I had in front of me to do my work, the more creative that I was. But I think that when I look back upon it, music was really always my first memory and my first love. My mom loved music. She lived at home with her parents until she was about 30 years old, and she was a bank teller. And she spent, I think it was something along the lines of $350 on this massive Magnavox console stereo with detachable, like it looked like a big piece of furniture. But in modern day dollars, that was like almost $3,000. And
Wow.
her parents lost their minds that she did this, but she loved music so much. She wanted to have it. And my grandmother always joked that she thought my dad married my mom just because of the stereo. Um, but that kind of became, I call it, in a way, when I look back on her life and what I know about it now, I think it was her escape portal. I think she was trying to figure out how to get her life off the ground. It was a much different time. And she loved music so much. She handed that down to me. And one of my earliest memories was when she took me to buy my first record. We have in the South, there's everyone knows Walmart, but there was before Walmart, there was Rose's department store. I think Rose's still exists, but it's the same idea of Walmart as a discount department store. And of course had like a music section.
Yeah.
And I remember her taking me to the store. Actually, I wrote about this write about this very vividly in my memoir. And going in and, not being able to, I mean, I was little. I wasn't able to read, but going down the aisleway, and I do remember seeing an Electric Light Orchestra album, sort of to put us in a period of time here. But strangely enough, I gravitated towards an Elvis Presley record, 45 of him doing a cover of My Way.
Wow.
Like that was, I'd never even heard it, but I'm like, Elvis had died, I guess not, within the last year or two before that. I think it was a posthumous release.
Right.
I brought it home, and it's amazing to me that that's what I chose, because I think that if there's one theme in my life I've always kind of done it my way. And it was amazing, and I just wore that record out.
That's amazing. Now, if you had stayed in law, what part of Stuart Meyer would the world have never met?
I think inevitably I would have still found a pathway towards myself. But it most likely wouldn't have had much to do with practicing law. I actually ended up working for the American Bar Association, ironically, for 5 years after moving to Chicago.
Okay.
And it's funny because I was in the business law section for a little while, working with a lot of inside and outside counsel for corporations. And I always smiled because, they're these high-powered lawyers, but they're secretly jealous because, and they get frustrated because they all want to have a voice in the business, even though their lane is law.
Yeah.
And, figuring out how to solve problems. They were always frustrated because they were largely kept in their own lane and only called upon when needed. It's like you're close to it. So, why not just cross over and go into that? But, in law school orientation, I remember ultimately who became my contracts professor led our small group. We were a class of 100, and they kind of broke us down into smaller groups. And I remember going around the room, and he was asking everyone why they were here. Why were they pursuing law? What did they want to do with it? And, being in music and, creating music and writing songs and things like that. And I said, I want to start my own record label. And he responded, well, why are you here? I'm like, what do you mean? Why am I here? To me, it was, is being a musician. I wanted to sort of, span the whole business legal side of music and all of that. I had this great big grand vision. But it was kind of a little disconcerting that, one of my professors was questioning why I was in law school, and maybe rightfully so.
I think instinctively you had the right idea because there's so many stories in the music business where that contract is signed without fully understanding what's being signed, or it's written without fully taking into account all the risks that are there. And so when you go to law and you understand contracts and you understand how to read a business function, you have a better grasp of how the company works, the risks involved, and how to help the company move forward. And so
Absolutely.
even that 1 year gave you potentially some competitive advantages versus everybody else you were, or your peers you were working with, because you had a full end-to-end understanding of what was happening in the specific lane you were in.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's, that ultimately, I think that, I wasn't too far from Nashville. I grew up just down, I call it up the road from Nashville. I think we were an hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes from Nashville. I met a number of folks that were kind of in and around the country music business. I wasn't a huge country music fan, but I was a Kentuckian, and we all listen to country music. But it was the music city, and it was so close to us. And once upon a time, there was two pathways out of law school. One of them was to go to Nashville and to work for free for one of the record companies. But a classmate of mine's brother worked there, and he was going to get me in. And the other road led to Chicago, and my dreams of working in film. And ultimately, I chose Chicago. I just wasn't quite strong enough to take that leap and go by myself to Nashville to work for free and not have a lot of money safety net behind me in terms of that. Because the idea because I was writing a lot of songs at that time, and what a great songwriting city it is. Country music basically lives and breathes because of songwriters. It's seldom the actual stars that you see that are making it all happen. But I hadn't even been a year off losing my mom. I was a bit estranged from my father at the time, and just had no safety net. And my sister had moved to Chicago, and
I see. Okay, I was going to ask you the connection.
yeah. So I started going up to visit, and I'm like, man, how could anyone live here? And then I kept coming to visit. I'm like, well, this is kind of fun.
That's right.
It began as like, what? It's just going to be an experiment. I had no plan. I'm like, I'm just going to go see what it's like and see what happens. And the rest is history. 23 years. I lived in the city for 3 years and out in the suburbs for the rest of the time. And here I am in Florida.
Now, you talk about music and film. Well, what's your favorite movie soundtrack song? Do you have a specific favorite movie or favorite soundtrack from a movie?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I love so many soundtracks. I'm a huge fan of John Williams. Vangelis. I love Vangelis. I was a huge David Foster fan growing up. If anyone remembers all the '80s movies with kind
Rocky?
of hits.
No, was that? No,
He did St. Elmo's Fire.
Which one?
The St. Elmo's Fire. He did the theme from St. Elmo's Fire, but then he did also like Secret of My Success, and the '80s were like the David Foster sound. And I loved it because he was an electronic multi-instrumentalist, because I fell in love with synthesizers and keyboards when I was a kid. I could never afford them, which you talk about the creativity piece of that. I cobbled together what I could. But Hans Zimmer, Danny Elfman,
for sure.
A lot of those film composers. But interestingly, we were just in Scotland, and my son brought his girlfriend along. So it was a family trip, and he proposed to her while we were there. We all knew it was going to happen.
Okay.
And me being the documentarian, I'm like, I'm taking just this is a great little device. 24 4K 24p. If you know what you're doing with cinematic mode, you can do a lot with these little things.
Okay.
But I was taking video here and there. She didn't think anything because I just had my phone out, and he wanted me to bring one of my big cameras, and I'm like, you know what? Trust me, I can do everything I need to do with this little camera. So I captured the whole day, the whole moment as we were walking out, where it was. And so I had it in my brain how it was all coming together. And there was a movie called My Best Friend's Wedding many years ago with Cameron Diaz and Julia
Roberts.
Julia Roberts. And I think James Newton or Thomas Newton Howard. I think it's James Newton Howard was the composer. I could be wrong, but there is I had the soundtrack for the longest time, and there's a whole basically the suite from My Best Friend's Wedding. And there was a moment where they're on the Chicago River taking the architectural tour, and they go underneath this bridge, and the music swells into, to me, one of the most beautiful moments in cinema I've experienced. And I actually used that music to score their little video of the day of their engagement and then after. And to me, it all culminates in a moment. It's like if you listen to opera, and the thing is, as a composer, I want every moment just to be this wonderful awe-inspiring, beautiful moment. But if you see how opera works, they spend a long, long time laboring through, sort of the sung narrative, going in this direction, and finally bringing you to the point where they just go over the top.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I think that's a real talent. I think most great film composers know that. I think that moment of My Best Friend's Wedding, was kind of, you can't enter into that moment too soon. You got to work your way towards it. But yeah.
No, that's, I mean, as you're talking to me, two of my favorite movies come up with the soundtrack. One is The Last of the Mohicans,
Hmm.
and the other one is Gladiator, but it does just that with Hans Zimmer, especially with the Gladiator. So I
Absolutely.
fully understand that. Now, if we go back to why stories matter, you often say stories create an emotional connection. Why do facts alone rarely change people?
I think that's because facts, they fail to offer a human context, which I think is the most important story ingredient. Stories become something akin to an amusement ride vehicle, for us to safely explore simulated personal experiences. We embrace the protagonist because we are the protagonist in every story, and we're walking those miles in their shoes, and we're figuring it out, and we're trying it out, and we're facing peril, we're facing moments, we're facing situations, things that we may not even dare to do so in our own lives, but we do it to learn more about ourselves, and ultimately, that's what storytelling is all about. That's why storytelling was created. Every tale was a cautionary tale. Rather than go out in the woods and be eaten by an animal, they told tales about, you know, the boy who cried wolf. Think about that. That's like one of the earliest tales, and every story has its lesson. It has its moment. If it doesn't, it's not a very good story, and we're all working towards it. Unfortunately, understanding the structure of storytelling, as I've grown to understand it, it makes watching movies a little bit difficult because you kind of know
Ah,
when
yes.
something's going to turn. Something. You know exactly when they're building up that turn, that unexpected turning point, and but I love it, and it's so beautiful because it is a simulation of our own human journey, and facts don't often tell a story because they just represent information, and it's how we weave together that information, and oftentimes, the underscore that led to that factual moment, that really makes the big difference. And I think, I've spent a lot of years in marketing, early digital marketing, social frequency. I do a lot of that. And I've always been a big proponent of behavioral economics, the
Yeah.
work of Daniel Kahneman, University of Chicago, fairly contemporary. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for it, but as a storyteller, Kahneman is everything to me because it shows that, you know, we're intelligent we're intelligent creatures that are guided by emotion. Even when, and what behavioral economics tells us that is that almost all the time, even when armed with a ready referenceable set of facts, we follow our emotions in economic behaviors
Yes.
and in decisions that we make. uh,
Yes.
and I
Especially, and
Yeah.
sometimes you'll hear facts are contrary, but they're
Yes.
true, but you still hold on to the
Yeah.
wrong path because you're emotionally connected with it.
Absolutely. And it's like no one ever you've never heard anyone say, well, I just really followed my brain instinct. No, they say I followed my gut instinct because our gut is a representation and manifestation of human emotion, and how we're guided by it. We're all emotional creatures. And you talked about leadership earlier. And I think it's why we underestimate the power of authentic stories. Great leaders know how to tell great stories. Great politicians know how to tell great stories. Boardwalk Empire, Nucky Thompson, one of my favorite moments. He was talking to the temperance movement right before prohibition happened in the storyline.
Yes.
He gets up and tells this grand story, and he has, all of the women gathered in the temperance movement eating out of the palm of his hand, and like someone says something to him as he's exiting, he's like, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's right. And I remember that scene. It was one of the best scenes in the whole series.
Yeah, but I believe in honest stories. I don't think that, people ask me a lot is where does the subject end and where does the filmmaker begin? It's because, we are being the eyes and ears and mind of our audience. in sort of capturing an experience and formulating and trying to understand, what is the story here? Where does the story, where does it live?
I agree. And it's funny because a lot of business leaders, founders, business owners, etc., have a hard time telling their authentic story, or they believe they don't need it or say right. And so, but in today's age, you kind of need to attach your authentic story, not to attach it with your company, so people understand why they should be doing business with you, or why they should buy your company versus the other if it's an M&A transaction. Do you agree with that? And would you encourage business owners to invest in platforms or media assets that allow them to tell their authentic story?
A trillion percent. And you said the magic word, why. And I don't know who the guy that did the TED Talks about the why. He didn't invent the concept of why, but he was able to project it in a way that got everyone thinking. Unfortunately, leaders, businesses, entrepreneurs, founders, they spend too much time selling something rather than bringing their customers into the experience and creating a human connection. I think the most successful businesses, they build strong human connections, often through storytelling. And, yeah, aside from me escaping adulthood to go to Disney World, some people think, the Disney adults were weird creatures, but I don't go to Disney World to celebrate, people in costumes, that are, portraying the adorable Disney characters. I study Walt Disney. I study every turn. I'm reminded of it. I'm a student of the way the Disney Corporation incorporates storytelling into everything that they do, and probably have one of the most rabid customer bases that are still out there. I'm even amazed at the lengths that people will go, for to stay connected to that Walt Disney World experience. And I think a lot of people who look down upon specifically Disney adults, they're looking at it for the wrong reason.
Right. That's right. They don't understand the science behind that connection, and the emotional path that it helps the adults, especially, be reconnected with the inner child experiences as kids, with their parents, the memories, and everything else. And
Absolutely. And years ago, I was actually talking about this morning. Years ago, my wife, who hates Disney, she'll be the first to tell you she hates Disney World, and she's more than happy for me to go, for a day trip, drive there, drive back. But years ago, she got a client opportunity to manage a project at Epcot for 6 weeks.
Okay.
It was the state of Oklahoma. They were celebrating, I think, their bicentennial, and so in the World Showcase between France and Morocco, they had their own sort of little temporary. It was the first state that was ever allowed to do this in the World Showcase, highlighting the state of Oklahoma. They had like a kitchen stage where they had, and they had local artisans and the Native American story and all of these different things. It was super cool, but she had to be there for she was the project manager for it, so she had to be there for the run of it. So our kids were young. So they actually came so that we wouldn't have to be separated as a family for so long. They were there for 3 weeks. I came for about a week and a half. But I had to go back home and go back to work.
Right.
And the amazing piece of that was I'd always, I'd been to Disney a lot of times. I always already loved Disney at that point, but each day for almost a week and a half, I spent part of the day in Epcot, and in particularly back where they were set up. And from an entrepreneurial and a business leadership and a branding type motivated person, because I always love marketing is a big driver of how I've made a living in all of this. Right. Because marketing is storytelling.
That's right.
But the amazing thing, if you ever have the chance to do it and can see the same place in any Disney park, day versus day versus day, you would think that crowd that is coming through there is the exact same people that were there the day it was Groundhog Day.
Wow.
Because the behaviors and the cues and the way they experience it is the same every single day. And the time of day that, everything starts unfolding down in the United Kingdom area. And to me, it's jaw dropping. And it doesn't happen by accident.
No,
It,
no.
it has been every bit of it. Disney has choreographed every single bit of it. They prompt you on how you're supposed to behave and how you're supposed to react and all of those things. And to me, it's absolutely fascinating.
That is true. That is true. See, now I'm going to have to go, and when I do, I'm going to remember this
Yeah,
conversation.
come on down and we'll go together and I'll point it out to you.
There you go. There you go. Of all the interviews and documentaries you've done, has there been an interview that stayed with you long after the camera stopped recording? And what can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Every time, every
Every
time.
time, yeah.
As I said earlier, I go after the stories that no one is telling, and I love to find the extraordinary and the ordinary. I spent a lot of years focusing on small towns because largely, I was a proud small town product that moved to Chicago, and I started seeing how the rest of the world thinks about or how the rest of the world talks about and thinks about and looks down upon small towns. I see how small towns are characterized in mass media, and I'm like, wow, they've got it so wrong. If you're really looking for happiness in life, big cities are a hard place to find it. Big
I
city. I love Chicago. I absolutely love Chicago. I think it's the greatest. I think it's the greatest city on the face of the earth. But at the end of the day, if you think about, and we know this through science, that happiness has three fundamental components. PBS um, did a documentary series about, I think it was called The Happiness Project years ago.
okay.
And one of the things is that happiness is boiled down into three things, and it is measured by the strength of our social connections, our sense of belonging, and our sense of identity. So connection, identity, and belonging. You can apply that to anything. You apply it to sports teams, identity, connection, belonging. We are herd animals. We're herd creatures. Identity connection. We're looking to latch on to identity connection and belonging. Walt Disney World. Identity connection and belonging. And it's like in small towns, everyone knows who you are. I finally live in a small town again.
Yeah.
And it's been, my wife's from New York, not the city, but up in the Albany area. But me returning home to small town life was like, and she's like, I keep running into the same people all the time. I'm like, that's the beauty of small town life.
Dog day. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But it's like, I also love it, especially if you think about it in the social media age. Small towns, your reputation is, you have a reputation.
That's right.
If you do stupid things, people are going to find out about the stupid things that you've done. We are more accountable for who we are. People are more accountable for themselves. And we look at, I'm not even going to go into the political fires that are raging across the country. We all know it, but you wouldn't even think it exists here.
Mm.
But you know that the divide is here. I mean, it's Florida.
Yeah.
But it's like we just don't talk about it. and we get to know each other as human beings, not as
Right. That's right.
news stories and all of that. So, to me, and I was telling you a story just a little bit about the individual behind me who, was a story I just inhabited for 3 days in Scotland. Donda, who is in his late 70s. He was kind of our private tour guide. We hired him to show us the Isle of Skye in Scotland, and we spent 3 days with him. He grew up there, and he would stop and tell his stories. I think that was the amazing thing. If you ever travel, find someone local who has a reputation. Obviously you can. We knew who he was. There were reviews, but this is what he does. The amazing thing is they're not only going to show you the sights, they're going to tell you their human stories.
Right.
That was the amazing thing. And him walking us there in his life stories and his life experiences. And we're driving down those one lane roads with all the pull offs. The reason I don't recommend anyone drive in Scotland, every American I ran across that drove in Scotland was very stressed. There was a guy in front of me one day in line at the hotel, and he'd already had 2 blowouts.
Wow.
Two tire blowouts, and he was just like frazzled. He's like, he did not want. As a matter of fact, Donda tells a story. He had a customer a couple of years ago that called him, said, "Can you drive us around?" And he came to pick them up, the same hotel we were staying in Portree. And the guy pointed over. He said, "You see that Mercedes over there? In 3 days, can I pay you and another person to drive that rental car back to Edinburgh? Because I don't want to get behind the wheel again. He was so traumatized
Wow.
by trying to drive. But back to the story, we're driving down this road, this winding road, and we just come from one of the castles and this and that, and he's telling this story. He's like, and if you see that White House right off in the distance, kind of sitting on this big piece of land out nowhere, he's a very nice man that lives there, a very handsome man. He's like, that's my house.
Little Scottish humor there, huh? And let's move a little bit to New York pizza dreams.
Yes.
I've met Mike Nelson, but I wonder what first attracted you to the Nelson family and eventually to Little Pop's Pizza? What was the genesis of the documentary?
I feel like my life's intention brought me directly to them. A long, but I will abbreviate this backstory, is when in Kentucky as a kid in my little small town, one day a couple from New Jersey showed up. Lena was first generation from Sicily, from Naples, and Michael was his father. His parents had immigrated, but he was in pizza business, and he had an uncle in Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is right down the road from Elizabethtown, where I grew up. And they said, "Hey, I think there's an opportunity if you came here and open up like a New York pizzeria and Italian restaurant in my little town in Kentucky." And lo and behold, long story short, we kind of became extended family. It was like every occasion was celebrated. We were at the family table that was covered in cigarette ash and newspapers. No one would sit it except us because that's the family table. And sadly enough, when I got old enough, I was working for them, delivering pizzas, working in the back kitchen, fell in love with the pizza business. And it absolutely broke my heart where their business dried up. More pizzerias, like when Papa John's started popping along. This basically, it took their market share locally and it just dried the business up, and they ended up closing down and moving back to New Jersey, which absolutely broke my heart. I hadn't seen them for 27 years and was doing some production in Philadelphia, and I knew where they were. So I called them and say, "Hey, I'm coming over." And I ended up shooting. I had all my equipment with me. I just shot that night after I ate half the menu from all the old recipes.
Yeah.
Just because this guy was such a character, Michael Pulcini. We called him the Italian Stallion. He was this good-looking Italian guy, just a character. And so I just set up my camera and just filmed him for a night. And it was just a slow weeknight, but I captured it all. And he always dreamt about being a rock star, so I did it in black and white, kind of Raging Bull style.
Okay.
It's on YouTube if you want to watch it. It's called Inside the Pizza Box.
I'll check it out. Yeah.
And after moving to Chicago, I'd always searched long and hard for New York pizza. The closest I got was honestly Sparrow's at the mall.
Yeah.
And I would go get whole pies from Sparrow's. I love New York pizza so much.
That's what I did for many years. You'd go to the local highway oasis, and hopefully there's a Sparrow there, and you get a couple slices. Yeah.
Absolutely. But then one day I'm scrolling through Facebook, and Chicago's Best TV from WGN, which you may know about. I don't know if the show's still on, but they put a call out, "Where's the best New York pizza in Chicago?" I'm like, I'd like to know where the best New York pizza in Chicago is. So I clicked on the comments to see what people are saying. The very top said Little Pops in Naperville. I'm like, I live in Naperville. I've never heard of it. What is Little Pops? What is Little Pops? Where I have to go to Little Pops. And it turns out that they probably hadn't been open for a couple of months at that point. So the next day, I was doing work with Sweet Baby Ray's Barbecue in Wooddale. I've known Sweet Baby Ray, for the founder of the business, very well. So that was all barbecue. So I'd had this big barbecue lunch, but I knew that I was going to go past the sleepy little neighborhood strip mall where Little Pops was.
Yeah.
And even after living in for over 10 years in Naperville, I don't think I'd been to that little corner of Naperville, but I slow rolled past it. It's the Worley location, and I'm like looking in, and so I park and I walk inside, and they had the sliced pies sitting out there. I was full already, and this jovial guy walks up and says, "Hi, I'm Michael. I'm Mike." I'm like, "Of course your name's Michael, because with the pizza pub is Michael Pulcini." And now I've reconnected with, because with the pizza pub, I've only had one real recurring dream in my life, and that was Michael and Lena come back and open the pizza pub, and I get to experience it all over again. But here was a new Mike from the New York City area up the Hudson,
Yeah.
and got a slice that day. And I said, okay, I'm bringing my wife back in here tomorrow, and you're gonna act like we never met, because she knew it went here before she got a chance to try it. So I literally, you talk Portnoy talks about burning his face off. I literally was driving home eating this slice of pizza, completely burned my mouth, but I'm like, it was
That's a
absolutely.
true New York experience right there. Well
It
done.
was absolutely true, and so that was the beginning of a great friendship with Mike and Vicky. He loved Inside the Pizza Box. He talked for a long time. Oh man, I want to do something like that. He's like, but I can't afford anything. I was like, well, why don't you pay me in pizza? So
Outstanding.
I was like, you know what? I want to capture your all story, because the more I learned about it. So that was kind of the start of it, and there's actually, you can still find it online. PMQ Pizza Magazine, which is one of the industry trade publications,
Okay.
did actually, I wrote the feature story for it, telling this whole story, and it's called The Never Ending Story. They did it basically just the year after the pandemic had started.
Okay.
So that's the story, but that's how I got involved with them. And they helped seed this documentary called New York Pizza Dreams that I did, and it really was filmed as a day in the life. I wanted to show everyone what I knew, what it was like, because I'd worked in and around the business. I have a very soft place in my heart for anyone in the restaurant business, and just hung out with them for a day. And it goes from making dough in the morning till closing up at night, when after things
Wow.
slowed down.
The whole thing was shot in one day.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
So yeah, so that started that. And after we did that, a few months later is when I started working with them, doing their marketing and basically telling their story. And that's how when they introduced me, they say, this is our storyteller, because everything that I do is telling a story. Now we went from, in 2018, one location to now 4 locations. And part of it, the biggest, I think, their determination, hard work, but I think a bigger part of as big a part of their success is the way in which we've told their story, and people have learned it and continue to learn about it. And it's our unique, it's your business DNA. No one can top that. You don't want to be kind of the neighborhood obscure pizzeria that no one knows about. It's like, I want business owners to share. I want to turn businesses inside out. That's a big part of what Social Frequency has done, is to show them your humanity. Because when you show them your humanity and you're willing to be vulnerable, you're willing to share your struggles amidst your successes, people will support you. People will gather around you. People will understand you better than they ever have. Because guess what? We've invited everyone who's ever seen New York Pizza Dreams, including yourself, into that story.
Yes.
And tell me you didn't see a little bit of yourself in different parts of, because that's like every film. We look for what is that simulated experience that we're taking away from this. And that's why we love movies. That's why we love music.
It's the arcs. It's the different arcs. It's the the tragic bankruptcy story, and they had to figure out what to do next. But then you go to the kitchen and you see Mike being jovial with Vicky, or driving, and she's calling, and he's trying to figure out where an order is, and everybody experiences that with their family, just different contexts, but you can identify an archetype of sorts where you fit in. And so I was bought in, hook, line, and sinker.
Absolutely. It was an incredible turning point, and it's a story I had to tell. And it's just like my first feature documentary called Born to Love Ballet. It was a real life Billy Elliot story of a Italian kid that grew up in Cicero. Dad was a lineman for ComEd, and all he wanted to do was dance ballet. Throughout his childhood, his father forbid him from it. He started sneaking off to train on his own, unbeknownst to his parents. He would get mugged because he'd have to take the Metra in, and then he'd take to connect with the CTA. and going up to the north side, and ended up having a great career as a dancer, and then ultimately as a choreographer, and continuing to give back to kids who were talented and deserved an opportunity.
Hey,
Um,
Stuart, he didn't get mugged. In Chicago, we call that he was just paying a tax. That's all. He was paying a tax.
yeah, that he definitely paid a tax with his money and his face at times. Yeah,
Oh man, yeah. Especially there in that time. Yeah, I can fully picture that and understand. But it also speaks to his determination to go towards his mission, his dream. Uh,
absolutely. And sadly, I'm so happy. He deserved every bit of his story being celebrated. It's still out there. You can watch it on YouTube because independent filmmakers don't make any money. Um, but very sadly, a couple of years ago, he tragically died in a car accident.
oh, I'm so sorry to hear
And
that.
it was just, it was kind of like one of those what moments. I mean, I had the amount of time that we spent together in pre-production, in production, always holding out for that next. We went out to San Diego when he did an opera gig, covering, and we followed a couple of his dancers, and it ended up only being one that ended up in the final film. And, we were trying to show the arc of a talented young dancer chasing the dream of being professional, dancing professionally in the same way his dream was to dance professionally. So it's definitely worth a watch, called Born to Love Ballet, out there on YouTube. Won't cost you anything. So
Great. While filming New York Pizza Dreams, and of course you've done more documentaries afterwards, so it sounds like your relationship with the Nelson family is still strong. What surprised you most about Mike Nelson and his family?
I think the big thing to this day, it's the determination. It's the ability to quickly adapt to whatever happens. They're constantly something's constantly breaking down. They're constantly fixing something. To keep going through and pushing forward through life's doubtful moments, and to approach it with humor, hard work, humanity, and if you watch New York Pizza Dreams too, you see a little bit more of the humility, because it was a very scary time for them. They almost lost it all again. And I'm not kidding. It was a very hard journey. There was a chance it was going to bring everything tumbling down.
Mm,
Um, and I think it goes back to something that Mike said in the first New York Pizza Dreams, is that you're not sure many others could walk a mile in your shoes. And when we live here in a day where, online reviews have become blood sport, and this whole influencer generation, and whatever is, they paid the price. They continue to pay the price, sometimes with their health and well-being.
yes.
But they're rock stars, and their ROI is the endless happiness. They're in the happiness business, just like Michael Pulcini was in the happiness business. And if you watch Inside the Pizza Box, you'll see this very raw moment where you can see in his face asking himself, I've been in the pizza business for 40 years. Did I make a mistake? Because he
Mm,
always talked. When we would close down the pizza pub, we'd turn off the lights. He'd kick the doors on. He'd grab a little drink, and we would just sit and listen to music. And he's like, I always wanted to be a rock star. I always wanted to be in music, and this and that. And it's interesting, and you'll hear it in the film. But the brothers who started the Stone Temple Pilots, the rock group,
yeah.
alternative rock group, they lived in Spring Lake Heights, New Jersey. That's where they were from, and they were one of his customers. And every time they'd come in, he would just talk music with them, and he's like, wow, you know so much about music and this and that. And he's like, oh, I always wanted to be a rock star. They're like, but you are a rock star. This is your stage. Your pizzeria is your stage. And he
That's
joked that people come in here. I'm like a regular priest here. They tell me their problems. This one's having this problem, that. And the role of the pizzeria owner, I think, is overlooked, not only for the sacrifice, the vocation of it. I think next to the priesthood, is there a vocation that is more devoted towards having to tend to every nuance, especially like little family pizzerias, independent pizzerias. And to me, even to this day, as Austin and the next generation starts to carry the baton here, it is just really amazing to see how much they've given, and it makes me really upset when people write negative reviews. I don't think anyone should ever write a negative review, especially if you haven't given the business owner the opportunity to make it right, because they always will, because they know they need to, because it's the
Yeah,
right thing to do.
that's right.
But all of these little petty reviews, and Mike's developed a bit of a reputation for lashing out against stupid reviews,
Did it?
which has won him a lot of street cred in the pizza industry nationally. It's a small community out there, but it's so true. I mean, imagine if I showed up in your workplace and I just observed you for a day, not really even knowing what I didn't know, and I write a scathing review of how terrible, a job you did, and how unprofessional you are, and how you screwed this. That would be illegal. Think about every HR law you can possibly imagine. And it's like, so why would you do that, for pizzeria? It's not, it's not this amusement pastime. These are people's lives.
Right.
And you're, just like small towns, you're working hard to build a reputation and just trying to do the best you can, and working in a way most people wouldn't dare. Just in terms of the amount of your life that you invest in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I admire them greatly. They've paid a mighty price for everything they've done, but they've gotten so much in return, and they love it. They absolutely love it.
No, their impact is palpable. So, and I'm sure, and I hope they keep growing as a restaurant group. I think it's a great culture they've built. I went to the new place in Aurora. It's well done. It's well done, and so
Yeah.
I hope they go further. If we go a little to documentary filming, what makes someone trust you enough to tell their story, their real story? That is.
Well, I think that, first of all of my films begin with pretty extensive pre-interviews. I need to kind of know what I'm looking for. I want all the details. And part of it is to make sure the detail is captured, because we could sit for 2 hours and you could tell me all about your life. And then I could start filming you, and, it's important that I know. It's like, well, tell me about that story you told me, or especially if it's like a sit down interview. But oftentimes I'll do this on the fly, in terms of that. And I think that, um, when people see the work that I've done, because it's all consistent. I'm not. Some documentary filmmakers are chasing controversy. Those are all the Academy Award winning films in war torn areas, and the pharmaceutical company that's killing people, and McDonald's, eating McDonald's every day for however long, and how bad. To me, there's enough negativity in the world, and it's like, I may not be the most popular genre of documentary filmmaking, but I try to capture honest portraits of life, honest portraits of individuals that I think anyone that watches my work sees that in it. And I think that's a little bit of trust sort of bubbles up from that. I just keep trying to shine bright lights into the world, to knowing that, you don't have to be famous. You don't have to be mega wealthy. You don't have to be, a million subscriber influencer, to have a good life. And unfortunately, I feel like in our society with social media, and I'm a huge user of social media. I leverage it every way that I can and use it as a great storytelling platform. I have nothing against it, other than I feel like the measure that people hold their lives up to against, it's kind of a wrong measure in terms of that and what it's cultivated. And it's like, a car can be used for transportation, or it could be used as a weapon. And that doesn't mean that we get rid of cars, but ultimately, I think the trust really comes from people, the time that I spend with them, and I spend a lot of time trying to make people comfortable, and I respect them. I'm not. I used to be really bad about if tears started flowing, I gotta shut it down. Like,
Okay.
but I think as a documentary filmmaker, you have to develop that thick skin and courage to, when something difficult is happening, just to let it breathe.
Play out, let it pray, breathe, and see what
Pause.
comes.
Don't say anything, and it's like, until someone gets up and wants to walk off, or is very adamant, said we've got to stop. I will always respect that. But I think that if you don't do that, you're going to miss out on an awful lot, because human beings are hardwired for threats. When we think about why do we love negative news so much, why do we got to hear about the murders, and we got to hear about the tragedies and the war, it's because we're really not as, in a way, it's our cave people instincts.
Yeah,
When
fight or flight.
yeah, when our daily life was sorted around scanning for threats in our environment because we didn't want to be eaten by the animals we're trying to hunt and eat. And in many ways, we're still like that. That's why, good news doesn't always sell. And, in some ways, people may think what I do is boring. But, I don't think that it is. And that's the light that I try to shine out there. I try to see the good in what's happening on a daily basis, and getting back to the why. Even when you encounter, and these are themes that I'm sort of navigating in my own memoir, is painting an honest portrait of my parents, as honest as I can, and without sugarcoating anything. But it's like, I talk about, my father was the selfish king, my mom was the selfish martyr, and kind of using labels to help remind people who the character is. But diving deep is, why is someone selfish? How do we become we're not born selfish,
That's right. Something happened. There's a story behind that.
And that's the why. It's funny, right before we got on here, there was a section that I was kind of going back over, and it was my mom's mother, my grandmother, who did not like my father at all. When she was 94 years old, long after my dad had passed away, I went and interviewed her, because I needed at least an hour or so of her. And she talks about that, but then she sort of backs off. And she talks about the humanity, I think, of my father. And I think as children, growing up, and our parents become easy targets, because and as a parent, I was just talking to my kids, like, hey, I'm a human being. I have bad days. I make mistakes. I say the wrong things and all of that. And, it's all about the search for the humanity of the people that are in our lives. And, we're all the heroes of our stories, but sometimes we're not the heroes. Sometimes we think we're the heroes, but we're actually the antagonists.
That's right.
We don't realize we're the antagonists until, 20, 30 years later, we're reflecting back upon these things like, oh,
I was kind of the wrong guy. I was in the wrong in this.
I understand that now.
I mean, my son just turned 16, and I told him, actually, when he turned 15, I told him, hey, this is the stage. You're going to disagree with almost everything that I do or say. And then at 25, you're going to call me back and say, okay, Dad, you were right here. I'm sorry for this. And he thought I was just joking. And a year later, he's 16. He starts to see it. And so my job is to prompt him, say, okay, this is a stage you're in. If you feel like that, don't worry. I understand. We'll figure it out. And that's how I'm trying to address those issues that we all grow up as.
Yeah, you'll appreciate this. When my kids were little, they were growing up, and I just would be at my wit's end. I had an alter ego, and the alter ego's name was Cursing Sailor. And I use that to explain when I just kind of lost my mind sometimes, and just like, ah. But it's funny. It was so effective. It got to the point where if they were misbehaving, I'm like, you know what? Wait. I'm like, wait. Do you see that? Her Cursing Sailor's right off the coast. If you want him to not get in his rowboat and come ashore, I suggest you do what I asked you to do.
I love it. That's great. If you could spend a year documenting any community in America, where would you go? What's your dream community to cover?
That's an easy answer. Dunedin, Florida. It's where I live right now. When I moved here, I wanted to do a documentary project, and initially it was called The Dunedin Life, because there's so many quirky personalities, and this place it's just such an amazing little community. But then it grew to be The Coastal Life, and there's actually 6 short documentaries under The Coastal Life out on YouTube, which you can also watch for free because there's no money in independent documentary filmmaking. But it's just following, with New York Pizza Dreams, it was a day in the life. I wanted to create an efficient documentary storytelling model. I literally spent an hour in people's lives.
Wow.
So I would drop in for an hour and capture what's happening, capture what their life is like. There was a guy who was from Chicago, was about to go into the Malnati's management program, moved to Florida instead, and he has got a little pizza trailer
Yeah.
doing his own version of Lou Malnati style pizza called Puck's Pizza. He wants the flexibility because he's a big hockey guy and his son is in hockey, and he needed the flexibility to support his son's hockey pursuits. So it was like just spending a morning with him, as in his space, how he does it, making the dough and the cheese and just grating up the cheese, things like that. So that's really what it is. It's right now it's a little bit pause. I do a lot of podcast work too. We are also the home.
Good.
Yeah, Dunedin is the original and only training home of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Wow.
So Dunedin has been involved in the Blue Jays since it became a team in 1977. And it's funny, I joke with people because I'm very involved in the baseball side of things here, and I get to meet the parents of our single A, low A Dunedin Blue Jays. So the player development, we have $100 million player development complex the Blue Jays does here. And then we have our low A team, which is the starting line for all these high school kids. Like our number one draft pick, JoJo Parker, is playing for the Dunedin Blue Jays this year. The number 14 prospect, Blaine Bullard, is playing for the Dunedin Blue Jays this year. And it's such a small town. I was telling Blaine Bullard's parents one night, I ran into him because they know who I am through my Dunedin-based Blue Jays work, Blue Jays fans work. And I said, it's funny. We're standing up in the left field bar, and I'm like, it's kind of like Schitt's Creek. There's the mayor right there. There's the city commissioners. There's the local realtor that sings the national anthem at the games and this and that. And it's just such a cool little place. And I'm just trying to follow the best pathway in my storytelling as I can down here while still doing all my day job stuff too. So
That's right. What story have you never told publicly?
Well, I think, really that goes into, there's a lot of stories in my memoir that I've never told anybody, some dark stories. And, in terms of, I think, talking about the human experience and the human condition, I do have to tell those stories because they shape me in profound ways. There's one that I talk about in the memoir that my wife didn't even know. I'd never told anybody. And, obviously I haven't published it yet, so I'm still like,
right. Yes, but there are a few. I'll look forward to reading them one day.
But when I look at how much that story impacted me and has kind of wounded me throughout my life, it's something that I feel like needs to be told because, none of us emerge unwounded in this lifetime. It's the accumulation of all of those experiences that shape our trajectory,
Yes.
or our lack of trajectory,
Yes.
and our struggles and our vulnerabilities. And, so there's a lot of those stories that, I'm embarrassed to tell, but I'm going to, because it's part of the fabric of, I think, the message that I'm trying to convey through this memoir.
Outstanding. Last question, Stuart. Imagine your children were watching every documentary you've ever created. What do you hope they learn about who Stuart Meyer was?
Well, I hope that first and foremost, 100 years from now, I think thanks to digital technology, a lot of this stuff will be somewhere in some dark corner of whatever it is they call it then. I don't know if it's going to, with AI, I don't know if they're going to call it the internet anymore.
Right.
But I think that I hope people will look at it and say, wow, I'm really happy that someone went to the trouble of catching, these lost moments. Think about how many lost moments there are in our lifetime. How, the moments that no one captures. I always like, when I was doing Small Town Flavor, I like capturing the smaller historical stories of big stories. Like, in my series Small Town Flavor, I documented how prohibition affected Bardstown, Kentucky. This little God-fearing community where bourbon just happened to be the main, the absolute foundation of the economy. Far beyond the gangsters and bootleggers and all of that is like telling the story of how Bardstown survived it. They weren't bad people. That just happened to be their industry, and it basically got shut down. It's kind of getting shut down a little bit right now with the drying up of some of the exports and everything that they're doing down there in the bourbon industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that everyone, so you think about subjects that people do, they document time after time. Everyone's told a story about this, and there's 20 million different versions. Like, I'm going for the one that people aren't seeing but should be told. And I hope there's more people out there that will do that, because 100 years from now, those are the stories that are going to blow people away. It's not the 60th version of the beaches of Normandy, or just the first thing that pops to mind of overly well documented historical stories. I think it's the history of humanity, and the overlooked moments that will just disappear because everyone's missing them. It's like those lost moments that I try to capture as many of them as I can.
That's awesome. Stuart, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to talk about documentaries you've done, maybe potential new projects, how would they contact you or follow you?
The easiest way, I'm obviously I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, somewhat. I have Social Frequency as my little one-man band, dream job container, if you will. I do have a website, socialfrequency.us or socialfrequency.net. I wouldn't shell out the dollars to get .com. Someone else owns it, but there's a contact form on there. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, that's a good way too. And it kind of shows what it shows both my personal projects and kind of the day job side of what I do. But I'm very lucky because my day job is filled with meaning. I produce the American Society of Breast Surgeons podcast, The Next Breast Thing. I produce the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses podcast, Med Surg Moments. And I keep telling the little pop story. I'm very blessed that all the work that I do is filled with such great meaning, and my ability to sort of give back and hopefully make some kind of difference in the lives of others.
That's amazing. And one last shout out to the Nelson family and Little Pops, because that story is what got this podcast going. And now I'm honored to know you as well.
Absolutely. And I encourage people to go out NY Pizza Dreams is the channel where you can find all of that content. Because in addition to what you saw, we have 3 other documentaries one for each location. And then we have an entire series called New York Pizza Dreams that just captures and documents the evolution of what they've done. We had an F3 tornado hit a few years ago near the Naperville location. And and that was a hard one to film because these places were just torn apart. And we were going in to give door to door, giving out pizza and pans of pasta and this and that. And, it's one of those things, it was hard to keep pointing my camera because these people were suffering mightily. You can see it on their faces. But I did capture it, and there's an episode in there about that. So yeah, go experience Little Pops. They have locations in Lisle on Maple Avenue and Worley Road in Naperville, in New York and Eola, in Aurora, and in Kilberry Lane in North Aurora, which is their newest location. I think now that you may have gotten a little taste of their story, you definitely have to go try their pizza, which was named the best New York pizza in Illinois a couple of years ago by the Washington Post. We made the top 100 pizzerias on Yelp a couple of years back. So it's a wonderfully inspiring story.
I mean, what I told Mike is that I'm going back with my whole family of 4 children. So we're gonna have a feast at one of their restaurants very soon.
Absolutely.
Stuart Meyer, thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. This has been an enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much.
Justin, thank you so much. Keep it up. Keep moving. The key to building a successful podcast is just not giving up.
Thank you, sir. Much
all right.
success to you as well.